Welcome into this episode of Coach's Corner. Jordan Woodruff with you. Great to have you along. Today's episode brought to you by the Oklahoma National Guard. We got Lynne Collenback with us, and great to have you along. First time that we've got a chance to do a Coach's Corner interview, and it's also your first time in the head role with tennis. So, first off and foremost, welcome. But how's that going?
Hi, everyone. It's pretty good. Yeah, the kids are having a good time. They're bought in this year, and so that's all a coach can ask for.
All right, I got to start with naturally being an outdoor sport, and when you're a spring sport, you don't really get started in the spring. You get started in the winter. So the first thing you're battling is weather. And with tennis, you have the weather issues. If you don't have like an indoor to go to, which we don't here, but then you also, the days you get nice, sometimes the wind can be up, which can pose problems as well, right? So I would imagine one of the biggest struggles always is trying to make sure you can get enough practice time because of the weather.
Yeah, but right now, guys, the weather is great. I don't know what has blessed us, but right now, I've even looked about a week and a half ahead. And we have got some wind, like on Friday, we've got some wind coming through. But for the most part, like, it's been nice. I think we had maybe a week and a half where we weren't able to go out to the outdoor courts. We don't have indoor, sorry.
Yeah.
But we were able to go to the outdoor courts and hit around. But yeah. Sorry, I just lost my train.
Yeah, you're fine. Hey, well, one thing that interests me is like when you do play outdoors, though, weather is a factor. And I mean, they'll cancel and lightning, things like that. But the wind in Oklahoma is always an issue. So it's probably something like maybe unlike other places across the nation that play tennis, you kind of, I mean, what's it like playing tennis and adjusting like that with the wind?
Well, I just tell my kids, like, yes, wind's going to be here. You're in Oklahoma. It's not going to change. So either you can use it to your advantage or you can make it defeat you mentally. So every time we have practice, anytime there's wind, we will always have practice.
Yeah.
And I will make sure that they work both sides of the court. If the wind is behind me, I have to make sure I hit really heavy top spin to the back, and that can actually propel my opponent like into the backcourt. So much so that the next shot I give them is like a chopped ball where it's really short, so they have to run. And so you can use wind to your advantage, and that's something that I've really tried to get across for my kids. It's either, again, we either use it as a hindrance or we use it as a tool to help us out. And that's something that a lot of sports don't actually have to take in consideration, right? Now, your kicker in football, yes, because the wind could blow a ball out of the trajectory that it was supposed to be in.
Right.
But the ball's so light in tennis that it moves a lot.
Yeah.
Like you might toss the ball up, and instead of getting it where you normally would be, it might be in front of you, it might be behind you, it might be the side. So, and then on top of that, while you're actually hitting the ball can move depending on how intense the winds are.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's pretty intense.
Yeah, I'd say so. So I was wondering about that because I thought the wind may be more of a factor in tennis maybe than any other sport, and you're saying that you think it probably is when you look at it. So first year, taking over the reins, and what do you always in the first year, and I like to ask first year coaches this, you have a base of what you're doing, but at the same time, you have an idea of how to tweak things. You even were looking at it and saying, how can I tweak it before you get in there? So what changes as far as philosophy-wise for how you're coaching tennis now being in the head?
Yeah, so it's been interesting because they were two separate programs. So the men's program was run by Coach Brad Larimer. Mm-hmm. He's amazing. I consider him a mentor in my life. Great guy. And then the girls coach, also a good mentor of mine, Larry Williams. So, but they were run differently. And so the challenge with taking both teams on, because I'm the head coach for the boys and the girls, was I wanted to make it more cohesive, and I wanted to make it across the board. Both programs are run the same, and we're even labeled the same. So we are Wildcat tennis across the board, and that's just because I don't want any difference in the two. It's the same sport across the board.
Right.
A boy plays the same sport as a girl sport for tennis. And so as far as that was concerned, I wanted to make it cohesive. I wanted to, as much as I could, make it to where it was equal opportunity across the board. So that was like my first philosophy going into it. And then I wanted to make a list of things that I wanted to work on this year. And I wanted to make sure that those were the priorities. Number one, I wanted to make sure that we were better across the board, which is kind of hard to like really determine unless you're looking at scores, right? And right now we've only had a scrimmage versus Bartlesville last week, and so I saw our scores improve. So I know that first thing has been checked off.
Okay.
At least for right now.
Yeah,
now we don't
right.
know as when it comes March 1st and we're actually starting our season, who knows what's going to happen. But I want us to get better. And then number 2, I wanted to have a clear practice plan for every single practice. So like, here's what I want. Here are the bullet points. And then for my assistant coaches who are amazing, I have some of the best assistant coaches of all time. I make sure that we're on the same page and making sure that they know what's going on in every single practice and helping me out. And across the board, like, practices are run really smoothly. So that was like my second thing. And then my third thing is I wanted to bring everybody together. So meaning, yes, we're one cohesive team, but like I wanted team bonding. I wanted to make sure my seniors, having a new coach come in, had a great senior year.
Right.
And so that means like going and doing fun things. We went to the OSU men's tennis match versus UCLA a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
And some of the kids, that was their first like delve into college tennis.
And it's a great atmosphere down there too. They've created something with the Greenwood Tennis Center. I mean, the Cowgirls, if you hadn't heard, just won the ITA National Championship. So, and they're going to host the National Championship for the NCAA this year. So that is a cool environment. Just 45 minutes down the road, you can take kids and let them see that experience.
And you get free pizza. So I don't know if you guys
Even
know that.
better.
Yeah, they literally give everybody pizza. Yeah. And so my kids were like, pizza? Are you kidding me? And then what was crazy is like just even going to that tournament, going to that match, my kids were like, this warm-up looks really familiar. And I was like, yeah, that's our warm-up. And they were like, did you get your idea from here? And I was like, you guys know I played college tennis. College tennis across the board, the warm-up is like very similar. Right?
Yeah.
You work on every single stroke that you would in actual game, things that would come up. So.
And a good coach, let's face it, and any coach knows this, it's pretty much all been done now in sports. You're kind of a copycat. You're taking the best you've seen and seeing how you adapt it for the talent you have.
Yeah. And so I would say, those were my 3 big things. And I think that they were so far they've been accomplished. I've had some good feedback. The Bartlesville coach from our last scrimmage was like, your kids look good. And honestly, for me, that means the world. As a first-year coach, you want to hear that feedback. Right. You want to hear, and for the most part, I think my kids are, like I said, they're bought in and they're excited about the year. And that's all I want. So
we talk about being in 6A and talk about it with, our bigger sports. But I also like to ask, some of the other sports, we think basketball and football, how hard it can be. But when you start talking about like some of the other sports, tennis and let's say like golf, for instance, swimming would be another one. Some of the sports that have been dubbed before, maybe the country club sports, right? It's so hard to compete in places like Ponca City, Enid, and Bartlesville in 6A because the resources that these athletes have year-round in those metros are just unbelievable. And you're going against a lot of times across the court with you. You're going against somebody that's going to be playing sometimes college tennis at a high level. So it is tough, I feel like, in Ponca City to compete at that 6A level. And we talk about it with those sports, but it's really tough in some of these sports like tennis.
No, for sure. Like I was talking to the Bartlesville coach at a coach's clinic that I went to this last weekend, and he was like, yeah, Ponca on that island over there. And I'm like, yeah, we're on an island. Like, it's not an actual physical island, but like we don't have the access that a lot of these 6A teams have. Tulsa area has like, I want to say like 10 country clubs that they could go get lessons from. You've got Edmond schools who literally have this amazing facility called the Edmond Center Court.
And a lot of good pros that are giving those lessons in the metro. Now, we have good people here like yourself, you know what I'm saying? But the thing is, it's like...
It's one person
versus... It's a year-round,
And I'm one person versus an army. So, in the end of the day, it is really hard. We were actually almost down-regulated to 5A. It was in the works. We were literally supposed to, and then one of the 6A teams dropped completely this year and then we had to stay in 6A. And I was actually very excited about the opportunity for us to play in 5A because of the island that we're on.
Right.
It's very hard. I have a couple kids that get private lessons, and that's awesome. I can see that they grow and they get better from that. But not everybody has access to that, you know, and not ready access. You have to kind of find and like kind of sift through it. I have a couple kiddos that go to Arc City just to go play with some of the Cowley people.
Yeah.
That's in Arc City, right?
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, it's hard for us when we're going up against, again, these 6A teams. But each day we get better. And I can see us really honestly starting to actually compete with some of these really top tier 6A teams this year.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Sometimes I look, you know, we talked about it with Heather with swimming, for instance. It's really hard sometimes because this school may have 7 of these athletes that could be playing college tennis. You may just have one, for instance, that has that opportunity here. So it can be tough, and sometimes you have to look at the basis of what do you achieve as a team in the year. You know, some people that are like those schools, they're looking at it, we got to win state championships. That's how we achieve our success. Sometimes I think it's tough for a coach. The ultimate goal is always win a state championship, but maybe to step back and say, no, we just got to figure out what we can achieve best for our kids here. So how do you balance that sometimes, you know, knowing that it's going to be tough to go win a championship sometimes with what the competition you have, but knowing that you can still get the most out you can individually out of each of these kids and as a team?
Well, it's hard. At the end of the day, and what's different about tennis from other sports is that there are doubles and there's singles. So we have run ladders, so I know who my number 1 player is all the way to my 24th player. And that's based on challenging each other. So I know that. So I know my top 6 players. So my top 6 players, I can put 4 of them in doubles. So that's a number 1 doubles and a number 2 doubles.
Right.
And then I've got a number 1 singles player and a number 2 singles player. And that's for boys and for girls. And so in the end of the day, I want to get as many kids as I can get to state or to compete in regionals as best as we possibly can. So I have to kind of manipulate those lineups to achieve that.
Yeah. And how hard is it, because, you know, it's a unique thing maybe from other sports, because you do have this situation where you have doubles and singles, and for a successful doubles team there has to be a little bit of a chemistry there. And there may be a kid that is a pretty good singles player, but you put them in doubles, they just have this chemistry maybe that's different. So how hard is it to manage that sometimes, trying to get your best athletes and figure out who's going to be single, who's going to be double?
So that's the interesting part. My actual number 1 last year and my number 1 this year is Jude Sinton. This is just for the boys, an example. And he was my number 1 singles player last year. And as I'm looking and I'm kind of trying to configure what I want to do for this year, I'm like, you know, I don't know. I don't know what to do and how to, like, figure it out. However, his best friend is on the team, and his best friend's our number 5 player. They have incredible chemistry. They work really well together, and they just, like, have this, like, unspoken bond. And so do I put them together and create this, like, kind of weird, kind of strange, kind of good team that could possibly go to state? Or do I split them up and make them singles players? It's interesting that you asked that question, because I have that on the boys' side, which we're thinking about doing, putting them together as my number 1 doubles team. And then on the flip side, on the girls' side, my number 1, she was actually my number 2 singles player last year. She's a good player. She's going to be playing for Wartburg College in Iowa. She just signed yesterday.
Who is that, by the way?
Kylie Flowers.
Okay.
She's always played singles. Well, while I'm looking through, you know, my 1 through 6, I'm also thinking to myself, okay, Kylie, she's going to have to, in college, play singles and doubles. She's played singles up into this point. She hasn't really played doubles, and she's going to have to. She's going to have to be good at both of those things. So I'm looking at that, and I'm like, okay, look at my 1 through 6. What can I do that might get her that doubles experience? And so I pull from that, and I find her someone that might work with her. And so what's interesting too is like my number one spot has to be either in my number one doubles or my number one singles.
Right.
But it doesn't have to necessarily be my number one singles. So if you notice, both of my number ones are possibly number one doubles
Right.
and not singles. And so the hard part too is number one singles is one of the most difficult spots to be in. And it is.
Yeah.
Most teams are gonna put your best player there. And do I
Right.
want to put my best player there who's competing against a very good player from these schools that have lessons every day, or do I want to put them on a team where they might have more of a chance with a doubles team, especially if they've got good chemistry?
Yeah. That kind of leads me to something else. It's like each question will lead to the other. So when you're making this decision, how much of input does the kids have? Because ultimately it's your job as a coach, but at the same time, you want to help a kid achieve their goals. That's an ultimate goal of a coach as well. So when you talk to them, what's it like? Do you see if they're receptive? I mean, how does that conversation go, whether, to be singles or a doubles athlete?
So what I did is we worked like a solid month on just singles. That was it. Then we've worked for the last 2 weeks on doubles, and we will probably for another week work on doubles. And what I've done is kind of try to rotate kids around and see where they work best.
Okay.
My top players, I pulled them aside and been like, what are you thinking? What's going on? And then we kind of weigh the pros and the cons.
Okay.
And so, it can always change. I tell my kids that the lineups that I created, the things that are in my head, might not actually be set in stone. And just remember that everything's kind of fluid.
That's sports. You never have injury. Somebody may not be playing a good time. Something may happen personal that maybe keeps their head out of the court. I mean, there's so much stuff that can go on. So yeah, you kind of got to be fluid.
Mm-hmm. And so they know that. They know that going in, and that's why we're working on both. We're working on singles and doubles because I need to see across the board who works best.
All right, so you mentioned a couple of kids, but let's go through some of the kids you think will make an impact. You mentioned two already, both one with the girls, one with the boys, but talk about some of the other kids that are catching your eye early that you think may have a chance to have some success this year.
So I have two sophomores on the boys' side. Luke Bloom, who right now is my number 2. He's putting in extra work outside of practice. He's looking awesome on the court. He has, I think, since this summer done a tournament every single weekend. Like, he's putting in the work and the effort, and I'm excited to see where he can go. We're kind of playing with the fact that he might be a number 1 singles spot. He might be doubles. My boys, we're still trying to figure it out. I also have another sophomore called Sutton Reynolds. He went to state last year. Did fantastic, got to day 2 at state as a freshman.
It's impressive.
It's impressive, especially if,
the competition in 6A tennis.
They are very good.
Yeah.
But that just shows the caliber of players that those two can be. I'm really excited to see what Jude Sitton does. He's been in that number 1 single spot, and it is a rough spot to be.
Right.
And I want to see what he does in doubles, because I'm really thinking that's where he's going to be.
Yeah.
Girls side, I'm excited across the board. We were talking to some coaches from other teams, and they were like, your girls look good. Like, they look like some of the best players that Ponca's seen in a little while. And so that is exciting.
Okay.
And my girls know that that's where we're at. As far as that is concerned, all across the board. So my top 6 are Kylie Flowers, Reagan Bohan. She's a junior, so Kylie's a senior, Reagan's a junior. Then you have Allison Edwards, who's a star volleyball player as well. She's gonna do great things in volleyball, but she's also a stellar tennis player. Then we have Electra Wilson, who's a sophomore. We've got Taylor Otto, who's also a sophomore, also very good at volleyball. And then we have Hafen. And so I'm excited about all those kids. They're all really good. And man, the possibilities for the girls team are almost endless.
All right. We're kind of in the, I guess you'd say, scrimmage portion, but when does it officially start, and how can people get out and support this tennis team?
So February 1st on is like scrimmage season, like you said. I'm still in the works to try to get another scrimmage with another team. It is really hard because scrimmages have to be done outside of school hours. So it has to be someone that's like in our area that's okay with driving, an hour to get here, and then we're out late. So I'm kind of in the works with that. We've already had one versus Bartlesville, and I'm going to be having a JV scrimmage very soon. And then March 1st is the actual start. Okay. And then it's actually a shorter season than it's been in years past, where they actually took out a week, the OSSA did. Okay. So it was interesting because while doing the schedule, I had to like smush a whole bunch of things. Yeah. And so it's been very interesting trying to navigate that. But March 1st, and we've got a busy schedule.
Yeah. Just compress that week. You lose that week, it makes a big difference. So, well, appreciate it. Thanks for coming in. Lynne Collenback with tennis, and thank you.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you again, hopefully after some success later on this year. This episode been brought to you by Oklahoma National Guard. That's going to do it for this week's Coach's Corner. Jordan Woodruff saying so long, and until next time, go Cats.